Oh, okay. Here's Emily.
All right. And there's Rhonda. Look at that. All right. So.
Sorry, I was late. I thought I had clicked all the right buttons, but I had clicked one too few.
Here we are. All right. So I believe I'm the host, and I will just say that here we are. We've started the recording, and this is the a subgroup of the Housing Plan Working Group. And we have Ed Cosgrove, I'm Helen Gregory, and we also have Emily Cooper and Rhonda Spector.
Thanks, Ellen.
Thank you. All right.
I'm just looking, and we have one person listening in too.
Okay.
How do you see that?
If you go to participants, and you show the participants, then it says panelists for attendees. We have, well, Alex is there too. So we have attendees of 2, but one is Alex.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So Rhonda, I know you sent something. I sent something around. I don't know how we want to report back or what we would like to do. Does that make sense?
Let's just each report on where we are with what we were assigned to do. You go first, Emily.
Yeah.
Sure, I will go first. So I reached out to a bunch of neighboring communities to see if they had something that was similar to what I had envisioned, which was like an inventory of either publicly owned properties or properties that might be places that we could put some sort of affordable housing or something along those lines. And I got a myriad of responses. Let me start off by saying I had already asked Lee if this existed, and she said no, that we had kind of a parks list, open space. That wasn't quite what I was looking for. And when I talked to other towns, they had a variety of responses. You know, Acton, for example, has a whole GIS system, and you can look at it in different ways for publicly owned land or privately owned land. Most places had an ability to gather this information or had already done it. I think one of the most, as I went to look at things, I think the 2 things that struck me were just in looking at Natick, had a housing production plan from 2021, which really kind of looked similar to the report that we are working on, but much easier to read. And I thought might be a good sample to provide to our planning department. And then Newton, which obviously, you know, our neighbor had invested in a very comprehensive plan. And I think if it's okay, does it break any rules if I share my screen? Like any?
No.
Okay. I mean, like public law, you know, meeting, whatever. So the Newton has a plan that they created, and I'm just pulling it up, the Housing Needs Analysis and Strategic Recommendations, and they paid a consultant to do it. But I just wanted to flag at the very end of it, it's actually a great plan, but at the very end of it, they did and provided, I'm going to share my screen, a comprehensive analysis. Can you all see a screen now?
Yes.
White screen.
Yes.
Okay. So this is the end of it. This is an actual list of properties throughout the city that could be used or could be thought about and for housing purposes, whether they're private, whether they're public, how big they are, the actual addresses. Some of these are parking lots. Some of these, potentially suitable for medium, high density mixed use. So this is obviously very comprehensive, and they did a fair amount of work to do this, and Newton's a bigger city than us. But this is kind of what I was wondering if it exists, and I'm wondering if we feel strongly about recommending that somebody do an analysis of this type. I also reached out to the Board of Assessors to see if they had something similar to what in Acton, they referred me to the assessor's office, and I did not hear back. So I don't know, this is very detailed. They went through, so there's a big list, but they also, they went through it was a citywide analysis and identification of zones and corridors well suited for greater housing development and transformation. Obviously, much bigger city, much bigger report, but I guess I think what I'm asking the group is, what is it that, is there something we want to recommend that Needham create or establish and maintain, or is this just like an exercise that's not worth it to pursue because, I don't know, everybody, whenever I ask people in the planning department, they say there's no land, so it's not worth it. But when you start talking to people, they start bringing up properties. So clearly there's people who are involved in town work who know about lots, right? So there's the East Militia, and there's the one next to the Congregational Church, and there's the one over here. And, I think what we need is just somebody to sort of brain dump that a little bit.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, it seems like something that should be in existence. I mean, it doesn't mean that every parcel is going to get developed or that private owners are going to want to use them for housing, but it certainly seems like having an inventory of availability would be useful, especially if you want to encourage other kinds of housing. If somebody comes into town and says to the planning board, I want to build something like, X, Y, or Z, and they say, well, good luck.
Right.
It would be better, obviously, if they could say, here's our inventory, here are the owners, or it's a privately owned. That would be,
and so it's privately owned. So go talk to those folks, right? Like, and see if, so I feel like there's it at least we know kind of what the options are,
right,
to some extent. All right, cool. Then you guys are saying what I think.
I think it's a good idea to do something like that, and then properties can be discounted. Oh yeah, well yeah, it's a wetland, or it's this, or it's that, or the other thing, and but at least there's a list.
And if obviously we know that's a significant undertaking to ask for. I don't disagree with asking. I think it's a great thinking, and I'm just trying to think of how could we kind of prioritize. Like, the piece that I keep coming back to is really wanting to look at least for this subgroup, is really thinking about properties that are accessible to public transportation or to the center at the Heights, and just access to grocery stores, access to, just access. So that's kind of where I keep wanting to focus, is on those properties that are accessible.
Right. And I mean, have things changed? I mean, are all of the T stations going to stay open? Pandemic has changed things. Are some of those parking lots going to end up being developments? I mean, I think it'd be good to have an idea. I don't know what's going on with the commuter rail and whether or not, there's any change in usage, or if there's permanent changes in usage, we should think about it. I don't know if there are or not. I mean, I know I go by the Heights parking lot and it's empty.
Right.
Whether or not that'll stay empty, I don't know. But
it's and that may be also, we'll see with people. I think people were going back to work and now they're not going back to work again. So,
it's true.
Okay, so maybe, I don't know what the result of this is, but maybe I'll draft something, just so you know, in the Natick plan, they had a Natick plan for housing production in 2021, and their recommendation was to inventory first the publicly owned land to determine suitability, and looking at things like criteria include access to services and transportation, proximity to schools, wetlands, or environmental constraints present. They also looked at, I think, looking at private underutilized. And then they did something else. They suggested something else that I wanted to run by you in particular, Rhonda, was that they talked about developing, working with nonprofit developers to develop a host community agreement. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It establishes an ongoing long-term relationship between a developer and a local government in an effort to create affordable housing consistent with the community goals. The agreement encourages regular communication between the developer and various boards and committees responsible for creating affordable housing. So I hadn't heard of this before. Have you heard of that before?
Never
Okay.
heard of that.
Me neither. So I was just wondering.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
I would
sure.
think if you did something like that, I have to think you'd want to do it with a multifamily, like not just a
Well,
senior housing.
it made me think, because I don't know if people are Facebook people, but it seems that the Toll Brothers has sent letters to the planning board saying, we want to be in an agreement with you. We want to offer our services to do your MBTA housing, your multifamily housing there. And so I think they're looking for some sort of kind of agreement this way. So what made me think of it. All right, well, I guess I sort of feel like our charge is to come up with a recommendation, and maybe that's I'll wordsmith something and we'll bring it back to the meeting, the
I
next
think
meeting.
it would be good to prioritize publicly owned properties over everything. So if like you can only chip off a piece of it, it would probably be helpful to have the publicly owned properties at least inventoried.
Okay. So I did get a little bit of informal information about the East Militia Heights. Is that what it's called? The Militia Heights, East Militia Heights. So it's federally owned property that went out to bid. And there was some conversations about who was going to bid on it. Was it going to be the ARC or was it going to be the Needham Housing Authority? And I think in the end, the Charles River ARC bid on it because there was pressure for the Needham Housing Authority to not bid on it.
Yeah.
Against the ARC. So, but those are the kinds of things that, Go ahead.
All right. Helen, I think maybe you talked with Reg Foster about this.
I didn't specifically about that.
No. I did. And what he said was that normally when federal property comes up for sale, towns get preference, and so they get a chance to buy it first. But this particular piece of property was exempted from that. And it was basically to be put up for sale to the highest bidder. And the two potential bidders were the town housing authority and Charles River School. And the decision was made that rather than get into a bidding war and just push the price up, that the town would back off and let Charles River bid on it and get it, because the population that they would be serving there would be a significant, not insignificant part of the population that the town would be serving anyway.
Sounds like a good.
So that's what I got from him.
Yeah.
I also heard that we have a new ED, executive director at the Housing Authority, who I happen to know because he did work he used to be the Norwood Housing Authority, Steve Merritt. And he's the interim executive director. And I think he may have more management and development experience than the previous one.
Mm-hmm.
Great. All right. Anything else on yours? That sounds great. Thank you. Should I go? I don't have a whole lot more than I had before. I sent out the email. I have been racking my brain to figure out a way to deal with demolishing, homes that are older. And I sent out the email. I mean, basically the two things that I've seen are both demolition restrictions, where they delay the timing. Wellesley and Newton, I think they're both a year delay. Bottom line, if you go in with a bill for a building permit for a building that is 50 years old or older, which is, if you think about it, 50 years is not that old for a house. But if it basically, you have to get a review, and they can stall you for, I think, in one place a year and one maybe 18 months. And I mean, honestly, there's a lot of old housing stock in Needham. I mean, we were just driving back from the Junction area, and there's some beautiful old homes. I mean, a lot of cottages that were here as summer cottages for, people who used to live in, when people lived in the city and would come out here for the summers. So there is a lot of old housing stock that it would be nice to make sure didn't get knocked down if it could get preserved. And I don't think we have any provisions in the town for that. I don't think there's any restrictions that I am aware of.
So how did Wellesley and Newton get this passed? Because I know that homeowners are going to say, wait, this is going to affect my value because somebody's not going to buy my house, right? So
Right.
and did it actually slow things down?
So Newton's was done in 1985 and Wellesley's was done in 2017. So I don't know, I didn't call. I found this information. That's a good question. How do you get it passed? Because I agree with you. I think there's a huge, concern that it's going to reduce home values. And obviously, it depends on the town. If you can get a town that's more worried about preserving older homes than are worried about home values, then it'll win in town meeting, which, I mean, Newton is not town meeting, it's city council. So we could decide. I mean, that's a discussion that we can have. I mean, everything that I've seen on, the town changed the restrictions on setbacks and side yards and all that years ago. I don't think that attempting that again is going to help in any way. I mean, the market eventually might make it a difference. I mean, there's going to be a point at which maybe people don't want 6,000 square foot houses anymore. I don't know. I mean, the market where the prices are going so crazily high, it's possible at some point the market may have an impact on, how many things get knocked down and rebuilt. I don't know. Certainly doesn't seem to have happened in the last 10 years. But that's the only thing. I mean, if I'm open to any ideas, but everything that I've thought of as a disincentive impacts potentially home values. I mean, we could talk to brokers and encourage them to get in touch with older homeowners, to have them be aware of the fact that if they choose to sell their houses, but I have to think they do that as part of their marketing. I can't imagine that they don't already do that. I just think that if a home builder comes by and there's no fee, and it's easy, it's just hard to pass up. But so, I'm open to any ideas to research.
If we drafted something, let's just say, like what Wellesley has, and then I'm just wondering what the path is. Then we'd bring this to our bigger work group, and then they would have to bring it to the planning board or to town meeting or to the select board, well, right? How would it work to get, what are the processes it would have to go through to be enacted, I guess? Because that would,
I mean, it might be the planning board I assume eventually town meeting has to approve it.
Right. But and so we need buy-in. We'd all need to agree, which I don't know if we do. Then the work group would need to agree. Then the planning board would have to agree. Like there's a lot of, so those are the kind of the steps. Right?
Yeah. What do you guys think?
And then ultimately, I think it would have to go to the legislature as a home rule petition.
Really?
So It's a fairly complicated process. Yeah. That's my guess.
Maybe we should find out if that's what Wellesley had to do, because that's just a bigger step.
It doesn't say anything about that, but imposition of a demolition delay allows owners.
I just think there'd be a lot of opposition to it.
I think there would be too. I don't disagree with you.
I mean, quite frankly, a lot of people, the house is their single biggest asset. And if they're going to use that to pay for 5 years in a nursing home or something like that, they're going to want to get the most they can get for it. And that's only fair.
I grapple with the fact that I feel like I'm supposed to be like representative, right, of like what we heard in the surveys and whatever. And so this came up, right? So do we say, well, here, larger group, if you wanted to do something, this is what Wellesley did. We're not saying
that's
do
the way
it.
to, I think that's the way to approach that. Yes.
Yeah. I think you tell them what the option is, and then we see where the planning board takes it. But I want to be responsive to the people who were interested in this topic.
No, but I hear you. I agree. I mean, it was one of my primary, concerns. You see it. I mean, our neighborhood, it's rampant, but we've also heard exactly what Ed's saying, which is people don't want restrictions that are going to cause them to get $100,000 or whatever number it is less for their house when that's their biggest asset. And Helen, you're dealing with the seniors. What do you think?
Well, and that is kind of my thinking, is especially in this particular subgroup. I mean, our task is really, well, I guess housing development, but we have a focus on sort of seniors, disabilities. So I kind of want to think about what is going to impact that group the most in a helpful manner. So again, I don't disagree with Emily's point about, yes, we could take this concept to the full group. And if this is something that we all as a housing plan working group decide we want to pursue, then we can get behind it. But I think I don't know for this small subgroup that it's really
it's not our decision to make, is that you're sort of coming up with. It's our decision to come up with
that's what I think.
We need to come up with some ideas. So I can try to talk to somebody in Wellesley and find out how they got it passed and who was for it. I can't say, it's funny. I thought I would be able to passionately say, here are the ways we're going to make sure that people don't knock down houses. And then I start to hear everybody talking and I'm like, I don't know how passionate I can get when I realize that people are very concerned about their years, their retirement years, and this is the money that they have to pull out of their houses. So it's harder to be, so gung-ho on saying that there should be limits, and it's bound to hit even houses that really shouldn't be saved, that really do need to go.
Exactly. And that's, I think, where I keep, because I'm sitting in one of those little houses that, I mean, sad as it is, so
right. There's no perfect answer is really where we're, but I will do the work to research it and find out what it is. And I think we can, as a group, say this is the thing that we mostly can come up with. We don't have any other great ideas of how to approach it, but none of us are saying that we're advocating for it. We wanted to just bring it to the bigger group.
And I think, Rhonda, when you talk to the folks in Wellesley, I'm just anticipating some of the questions, like, have they seen a slowdown? Have they seen prices go down in what people are being offered? Because it's pretty recent. So it's 2017. So it's been 5 years. What has happened? So we could see what the impact is of it, what was of it, whatever I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Okay. All right. If you think of other questions, send them to me.
And I think, do they have any? The only other thing I would say is, like, what if the house is 50 years old, but it's a piece of junk? Like, do they have some sort of waivers that people can get when it's not worth going through this process of delay because that structure itself is not habitable or salvageable or whatever?
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, and if anybody has any other option, I probably won't get to this until next week. So if you have any other questions you want me to ask, just email them to me, and I'll add them to the list.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. It's good feedback because I've been struggling with this. I just don't know what, I wish I had some brilliant idea that would make everyone happy, but I don't have one. All right, Helen, do you have anything?
So I feel I want to dig in better. So I would love for folks to, give me as much feedback in terms of sort of discrete focal areas. But one thing I did sort of follow up on is with one of the social workers over at the Center at the Heights, who she had commented previously about Charles River Landing and how that works out for folks. And so I had not fully understood her remarks. So I'm just going to read you a little bit of her input here, where, her point is that it's the minimum, it's the income levels that are hard to fit within. So for example, if you're talking about Charles River land. So we all know that there's public housing. And her point about public housing is that Needham doesn't necessarily have enough to satisfy all the needs here. There's a long wait list for public housing. But then the next step up being for folks who are on a fixed income, there's really it's challenging because they can get, let me just read to you. There's a minimum income and a maximum income to be eligible for the 40B units. And so it can be tough to fit into that window. And then she sees applicants who get rejected because there's a credit check and the income guidelines. So those two pieces are tricky for folks to fall into. And then the other challenge is that the rents are based on the percentage of median income in town. So for seniors who are on fixed incomes, this can be problematic because they eventually can get priced out versus the Public Housing Authority. So she, her point is, it can be hard for seniors on fixed income to find anything that they can really get into. And then, her point also is that there are some great opportunities here in Needham. If folks do fall into that income level, then there are some really nice opportunities like Charles River Landing, like the Kendrick, and like Moderna, who all offer the 40B units. So, it's, we all know that we're looking for more opportunities for folks.
Does she say she turns away a lot of people, or is it, are there 40B units filled?
I would not, let's see, 40B. There can definitely be a wait list for 40B units, but her point was more that there's sort of that income level that is tricky to fit into.
Yeah.
So it's the income guidelines, the credit check, and then it's the fact that then the rents will increase, and that can kind of bump people out of it just based on, if the rent goes up $100, they will have to move out. So for seniors,
move out because they can't afford it, or they have to move out because they no longer qualify?
Because they're on fixed income, so they can no longer afford that increase for that 40B unit.
Wow. Okay.
So, it's, so that's one piece. The other piece that I landed on, I don't know if you all listened to Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, but she has a nice program on WGBH on Sunday evenings on the radio. And she did a wonderful overview of senior issues. And one of them that I learned about through this Sunday night program was the Scandinavian Living Center in Newton. However, and you all may be familiar with that already, it does not offer any affordable units that, as far as I am aware.
It's an assisted living.
But I love the concept of, they have a lot of community space and just a different design. So again, I guess it takes us back to that concept of where's the, incentives for different developments, for different approaches. One of the other shows she had a couple of weeks ago was on co-housing, and somebody had mentioned that to me, and I'm like, yeah, it's a great concept, but of course that takes a real, some of those folks have worked for 20 years to develop the co-housing situation. So anyway, I guess I'm having a hard time really kind of getting myself focused and figuring out what to recommend or where to spend my time and energy and focus to be able to come to this group with some more productive information.
I think you've done a great job. I think it's, every developer under the sun is trying to figure out what you're trying to do, as a volunteer on this project. So I think it's, even if what you're realizing is that it's hard to come up with it and to finance it, That's information that I think we want to feed into this housing plan, is that it's hard to serve everyone, that, that we're trying to fill in the niches. I think, Ed's going to probably talk to us a little bit more about the low income housing. That's the other piece. I mean, 40B fits a group of people, but there's still a group of people who have too much income for 40B and not enough to go to North Hill or to Newbridge on the Charles and stay in their homes because they don't feel like they have choices close by. I mean, I think the fact is there are choices, just people have to travel to them. And they're not they're in places where land is a little bit less expensive than it is here. And not far out, maybe a half an hour away or 20 or 45 minutes away, but they're just not as easily done here. So, but I think, your conclusions are, 40B is available. There's sometimes waits, but that is an option for seniors. And but it's income restricted in some ways, and that everybody doesn't qualify. So there's still people whose needs aren't being met.
Yeah.
Ed, do you have anything you want to?
Okay. Okay. So I think that I talked to this group after I had spoken to Reg Foster last time. Maybe not.
Give us
I had read the report.
I think you'd read the
Housing
report, but
Authority, essentially their
talked.
development plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I spoke to Reg Foster, and there's a significant departure from the development plan that's a couple of years old now to the direction that they're planning on going now, relative to the Linden Street project. Their idea a couple of years ago was to build a large building on what's now vacant land between Linden Street and the so-called High Rock Estates development, and then tear down Linden Street and, I don't know, dispose of it somehow. Now that's changed. And what they want to do is a phased development plan of the Linden Street property, which would ultimately double the capacity, I guess you'd say, or the number of units and the potential for people to live there from what it is now. And they would be, maybe depending on what ultimately comes out, 2-story buildings that are handicapped accessible and meet all the current guidelines, and are slightly larger units than what's down there now. But it would double the number of people who could be living on that property. And then in addition to that, they would redevelop the rest of the so-called High Rock Estates, which I refer to as veterans housing, which is right up the street from that, by eventually replacing all of the little single-family bungalows with something similar to what they've put in about 10 years ago now, duplexes. And again, that would increase the number of available units and the number of people who could be residing there. And that would be for a combination of both seniors, low-income seniors, and other low-income people in town as well. And then their plan for the property up off of St. Mary Street, the 2 properties up there, pretty much right now just involves upgrading the buildings and maybe ultimately building a new building on a piece of vacant land that they refer to as the berm. And so that's what I got from Reg Foster as far as the Housing Authority is concerned. I've also been trying to pursue what's going to happen to the Stephen Palmer building in 5 years when the lease is up. And Miles Tucker, who works in the town hall, he's Kate's assistant. He's, as they've described him, He's the what's her name? Anyway, he's Kate's assistant, and he's digging around to find out information about the Stephen Palmer School, where it might be going, and what would happen in 5 years. So he hasn't been able to get back to me yet, between a combination of town meeting and vacation, but he told me he would get back to me.
It sounds like it was a good thing you asked.
Yeah.
That's very funny.
Nobody else seems to know much in town about it, so
yeah,
it's interesting. We're raising the issue.
Yeah, no, that's great. So that all good, I think. I think that's amazing, because the best thing you can possibly do is increase the density on already owned property. That's the best thing we could probably get out of this whole housing plan, is to encourage everyone to support, increasing renovation, renovating any property, any built units that need to be renovated, and increasing the density and creating new units as much as possible on existing.
Right.
And the fact is that it sounds like they're going to renovate stuff that it'll be eligible for people who are very low income, or these units, or at least be on the subsidized housing inventory. And so there was some of the public response we got was, should we get to a real 10%, right? Versus right now we're over 10% on the supportive housing, subsidized housing inventory, but that's because we count all these other things. And this would be a substantial, doubling what we have, basically, is what you're saying. In both,
exactly,
both High Rock and Linden Street, we would double what we have, would be amazing.
Yeah.
For that niche, that won't get to the folks, Helen, for example, who are over income or whatever, but it'll definitely go there. So I guess I've been watching the show New Amsterdam a lot, and he says, how can I help? I guess our question for this work is the housing authority, like, how can this group help? Is there something should we just get out of your way, or is there something we can do that would be helpful in any way as you go through this process?
Mm-hmm.
So I would imagine, I would just suggest that we want to write up something. I agree with what Emily just said, and I think that the final thing for this would be a write-up that says we want to do everything that we can. For example, the town meeting just approved pre-development money for one of the projects and that's important. You don't get any more money unless the town provides the match, some funds to show that they're behind the project. So I just think the report should, I would say, personally, as priority number one out of the housing report, is that we maximize anything that the housing authority can do with this kind of housing, and we support them in every way we can. So that would be
yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, but and I think go ahead. Sorry.
I think the housing authority is beginning to get their act together too.
Right. And the housing and the report should also suggest that anything they need to borrow staff from the town, or if they need assistance, or if they need volunteer groups, that the town assist them in getting volunteers to help, or any support that they need, that the plan should suggest that the town should do everything it can to help.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be my thinking.
I agree with that.
And I think for Helen, for your, I'm just going to throw out my thoughts, and everybody, I think that we should support creativity from developers and from existing owners. I think if I just heard correctly, the one who's I don't remember which, Wingate, I think, is across from the new development. They're changing some of their units to something different. I think, we should try to get out of the way and help in any way that we can senior housing providers that are trying to make changes that are more suited to the current market, because the market's constantly changing about what seniors need or want or are willing to pay for. So
I would just flag a couple of things also for the housing authority and for any of these senior housing properties. There's a lot of stuff about age friendly that came up at town meeting, you know, making sure that whatever development we're creating, you know, meets the needs, the long-term needs for both housing and if, you know, services make sense or anything like that. I don't want to lose sight of, we got a lot of comment from people who are particularly parents of adults or youth with disabilities. And so I want to make sure that whatever we're encouraging creativity there as well. And I do think, and maybe we can bring this up on the next meeting that we have with the larger group. I do think we had a question about whether or not there's a zoning issue with creating sort of group living situations that don't become boarding homes, rooming homes. Do we need to maybe we need to research that a little bit?
So I was thinking that was on my to-do list. So I can reach out to, I guess I should start with, why am I blanking on her name? Just
Alex or Lee?
Lee, I was thinking Lee, I could just reach out to her and just ask about that zoning question about.
Yeah, I just wonder if that's a barrier.
Okay.
I know that it's been a barrier in other places. If that's something we could address, I think there may be support for that. And that might pave the way for some of this creativity and different designs.
Okay, I will definitely reach out to her right away on that one.
And then I think lastly, sorry, if we increase the density for the Needham Housing Authority, those two properties, I wonder if they fall under, so right now, Linden Chambers, for example, is for people 60 and older or younger people with disabilities with a small portion. And those are state and federal rules.
Mm-hmm.
If they double the amount of units, are they also increasing ones for younger people with disabilities? Because I think that would also speak to this issue. Or is it just, are they planning to just, you know, are they planning to increase the number of units for the populations that are currently living there? Am I making sense? Sorry, it's been a long day. So
are there any set asides?
Right.
That's what they refer to them as you can ask them if there's any set asides for different populations.
Right. And that they may not know yet too. They might say when we go to if we go to the state for money, they might give them money from the Facilities Consolidation Fund, which is for people from the Department of Mental Health.
Will you lose your call?
What?
Can they reboot my computer, or will you lose your call message?
I don't know. Go ahead and reboot it. I'll just. I'm having a computer problem. Okay. My wife, and so I don't know. Our provider might do something that'll make me lose this call. But
okay,
if I suddenly disappear,
that's a great question, and I think you're right. It probably will happen when they get funding. They'll figure out.
Right, but maybe what we can do is what we encourage. We support the Housing Authority, and we hope that it will create more units for seniors and some units for people who are younger who are disabled.
And that's my impression.
Okay.
From talking to Reg, but I don't think there's any hard numbers yet.
Okay. All right. So we're getting an inventory. We're getting more dense housing. Helen's going to look at a couple of things on her end, and I think, and I'll research the Wellesley.
And I'll keep pushing on Stephen Palmer.
Oh yeah, that would be great to know.
So we have, I think, have a meeting next week of the whole group, it looks like.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, the 26th.
Yep.
We want to see how that goes before we set another meeting of this group, or should we go ahead and set one of this group?
I'm thinking since we're all together right now, maybe just get it on the calendar, at least a tentative, just because it's always easier to do it in person. Just quickly look at our calendars.
Yeah, and also I may miss the next meeting next week, so I would rather get this on the, and we can always cancel if there's nothing to.
What about, I'm looking at, I was going to say June, so we have a meeting on May 26th of the big group.
I need the account.
And on June 9th.
Oh God.
It's on a bill.
And again on the 9th?
Yeah.
I don't have any of these on my calendar.
Maybe I'm wrong.
The working group, I have it on the 9th as well. The 26th.
Have it on May 26th too?
Yes, May 26th and June.
And then again, 2 weeks later.
Yes.
I was going to say we should, well, I was going to propose June 14th, and I thought that would be between, but we're going to have 2 large group meetings before then, it sounds like.
I won't be here between June 6th and June 16th because we'll be away. But
okay.
Yeah.
So
don't let that stop you.
I think we're going to run into those problems starting soon. So I was looking for Tuesday nights. We could do the 21st of June.
I think I can do that.
I can do that.
Okay. All right, I'll ask Alex and we'll see what happens.
Okay.
That'd be June 21st.
June 21st.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll send out
an
invitation. I hope you're going someplace fun.
Yeah, we're going to be a trip that we planned 2 years ago, a riverboat cruise up the Rhine River.
Oh, that's awesome.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
That's great.
So it's finally going to happen.
Only a 2-year delay, you know.
That's all. Just 2 years, you know.
Years. What's 2 years? Oh, well, a very long time. All right, guys. Well, this was good. Thank you.
Okay. Well, good.
I think we're making progress.
I think we are.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to dig this stuff out, but we're getting there.
Yep. All right. Everybody have a great week and weekend, and we'll see you soon.
We'll see you.
All right. See you soon.
Good.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.